Hello everyone! This is Billy Cultist with another Dreams tutorial for you. This is going to be about a subject that has been requested lately, and that is how to make a day-night cycle in Dreams. I have goofed around quite a bit with the making of day-night cycles since I've been on Dreams, and so that's why you've got me instead of Jimmy on this one. I also have this wonderful 2D moon painting here in the scene to help me with the occasion, since we're going to need a moon, and I felt like we should have a bit more than just some dumb spot. Anyway, what is a day-night cycle? My understanding of a day-night cycle in a game is when the time of day changes dynamically in the game world, and you see the sun set and rise and stuff like that. Think of the Legend of Zelda games. Now, Dreams is a very deep creative platform, and there are usually many ways to approach any given problem. So don't think that this is the only way to create a day-night cycle in Dreams. It is one of the ways, and I think a very useful and effective way, and also the way I like the best so far. This method that I'm going to use, I think, offers a very high level of control over the details of your cycle. So let's get into it. I'm going to turn on the grid snap feature first. The grid snap is pretty useful when setting up this method. We're going to want to get a good idea where the center of our scene or map is. In this case, my playable map area is quite small, incorporating the house and the roads. A lot of the larger elements you see when I'm zoomed out are just distant background visuals and not intended to be accessible to the player. So this here is roughly the center of my map. Having determined where the center is, I'm going to place a sculpture object. I'm going to make a hollow cylinder and snap it to the center. I'm also going to make it kind of narrow. This object is basically going to act as the foundation for the travel path of our celestial objects across the sky. Now I'm going to establish the celestial objects, starting with a sun. I'm going to use a simple paint object, but it's not impossible to use a sculpt if desired. I'm going to turn on my visual grid so I could line up the sun at the halfway point on my wheel. Now we'll open the sun and tweak some things. We'll turn up the glow and set it to never emit light from glow. Now I'll just grab the ready-made moon and line it up with the wheel on the opposite side to the sun. We'll now open the sculpture's settings. I'll set imp interaction to ignore and physics cost to low. I will also set the sculpt to never cast shadows, since we don't want it messing up our skylight later. Now, we'll select our sun, moon, and wheel all together and group them. When grouped, the whole shebang will function like a single object. Now we'll get into our gadgets and find a tag. You can hold L1 down while placing the tag to have it snap to whatever surface you're holding it over. I'll stamp it on our sun and position its origin point at center. I'll also change the tag name to sun. Now I will do the same procedure with the moon. It's now time to get into the animation part of this. We'll go to animate and get a keyframe. We'll just stamp it next to the wheel, and we won't record anything yet. I'll dupe out our keyframe until we have 4 in all, and name each one. The first one we'll call Moon Apex. The second one we'll call Sunrise. The third one we'll call Sun Apex. And the last one we'll call Sunset. Now that that's done, we've got to animate our wheel. So I'll turn on Grid Snap again. We'll then record a position for our Moon Apex key, making sure to rotate the wheel so that the moon is at the top. Then we do the Sunrise key, rotating the wheel so that the sun is on the right. Now we do the Sun Apex and rotate the sun to the top. And finally, we record a rotation where the sun is where it started on the left. With all these recordings locked in, we can go ahead and scale up our wheel to fit our scene and get a distant sun and moon in our sky. Generally speaking, shoot to have the wheel big enough so that the sun and moon are beyond your furthest background visuals of terrain. Now that the wheel is scaled, we're going to stamp a sun sky light gadget into the scene at the center point of the wheel. The sun sky light creates a distant light that simulates sunlight or light coming from an astronomically far off object, letting you control the brightness and the location on the skybox of the scene. I'm going to open the tweak menu of the light and make some changes. I'm going to turn off Sun Visible because I'm using my own paint object to represent the sun visually. I'm also going to go over to the Sky tab and make a few adjustments. These are preferential adjustments of my own and aren't really necessary to make the system work. Now we'll go back to the Sun tab, where we need to connect some things to make sure we have our light follow our visual objects properly. The important thing here is the sun position input. First we'll go to the Sun tag, and we'll connect Scene Space Transform to sun position in the Lights menu. When this connection exists, you'll notice that the sun sky light will be aligned to the tag we placed on the sun object earlier. We now will make the same connection for the moon tag. You will now notice that if we turn off the power to one of these tags, the sunlight will be aligned with the tag that is still powered. For now, I'll turn them both off. They'll be important again soon. Now we'll get into the meat of our cycle. It's time to place an animation timeline in the scene. Now, some of you might be asking if this could be done with an action recorder instead of a timeline. The answer is yes, probably. But I'll be using a timeline for this because there's an added benefit. Jimmy knows a method for keeping a day-night cycle consistent between scenes. To explain this, imagine you wanted to say go inside a house in the scene, and the house is a separate scene on its own. Imagine you entered a house at sunset and spent significant time inside and then exited again. You might want your scene day-night cycle to reflect the time spent in the house. You might want it to be night when you exit the house. Jimmy knows how to do this, and it works best with the classic animation timeline. Now I'll open the timeline settings and set it to loop. Then we'll open the timeline itself. I'm going to stretch the timeline to have 24 divisions, representing the 24 hours of a day. This isn't absolutely necessary to the system. You could make the timeline whatever length you want and get it to work. I just want it this way. Now that we've got our timeline set up, we'll move our 4 keyframes onto it. We'll open our 4 keyframe settings and set each one to linear blend. We move our moon apex key to the start of the timeline. Then we duplicate it and move the dupe to the end of the timeline. Make sure at this part you don't stretch out the keyframe because that will cause wonky stuff with the movement that we don't want. Try to get the key right on the edge at the end of the timeline. This can be kind of finicky, but it's doable. Now we'll align the sunrise key at the 6 mark. We'll put sunset at 18. And sun apex at 12. However long your timeline is, the main thing you want is for these keys to be as evenly spaced as possible. Now we'll zoom out and test the motion of the wheel. The sun and moon should rotate relatively smoothly around the center of the scene. If we see anything janky, it is most likely because of what I said about the last keyframe on the timeline. Now that the motion of the wheel is established, we'll get back to the tags on the sun and moon. We'll place 2 new keyframes. I'll name one track sun and the other track moon. Then we'll put them on our timeline. We'll make a recording for the track moon key, opening the tag settings and recording the power button as on. We'll then do the same thing for the track sun key, this time with the sun tag. These 2 keyframes on the timeline are going to determine when the distant light switches between sun and moon. In dreams, it's not possible to have two distant lights at the same time, so we have to have a single one switch between our visual sources. I like to try to make the switch happen right as one object is setting and the other is rising. Now that we've lined those up, let's play the scene and see the effect on the light direction. I'll add here that this following tags method is super smooth and awesome for this. The only alternative I know is trying to manually animate the light direction to match the objects in the sky, and I have tried this in the past, and it is one of the most miserable experiences a human being can have in their lifetime. That all seems to be working well, so now we'll just open the tweak menu of our wheel object and set it to not visible. Make sure you only do this to the wheel itself within the group and not the whole group. Now I will expand the timeline down a bit and make some room for the final ingredient of this, which will be keys to control the intensity of the sunlight and the intensity of the sky ambient light. I do highly suggest to control these settings with separate keys entirely to keep things from getting severely confusing and give you more control. We will also set these keys to linear blend. Since the timeline starts with the moon at apex, we'll make our first light intensity recording to reflect this. Because it's moonlight, we'll record the light intensity as significantly reduced. We then also make a recording of the skylight as being heavily reduced to match the midnight hour. We'll be sure to have a key for the light that will have light intensity of 0. This is because we want to hide the transition when our light switches its tracking target. All we have to do now is keep making new keys for these light intensities across our timeline. You can scrub the playhead to figure out where you want things to end and start. Now we can give it a quick play to see how it looks. Okay, so everything seems to be functioning smoothly. You may be thinking that things are moving kind of fast. So what we'll do is open up our timeline tweak menu again. In here, we can reduce the timeline playback speed right down to incredible levels of slowness. If you set it into the hundredths decimal places, you can get it so that each division of the timeline takes actual hours to play. So you can make each hour a real hour if you wanted to. If I press play on the scene now, you'll notice that the moon is so slow that it doesn't look like it's moving at all. We'll make it a little faster so we can at least see it moving detectably. Anyway, that is the basis for how to do a great day-night cycle in Dreams. Now, this was basically showing the foundation of the system, but you could do a whole lot more, for example, in the timeline to customize it to your liking. You could add keys, for example, to change colors over time, or keys to change grade and effects settings. You can have all kinds of little details and controls with this method, and as I said before, it integrates with a method Jimmy knows to allow you to keep the cycle constant between scenes. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you watched it all the way through, I salute you. Hopefully this was helpful to someone out there. If it was, then go ahead and subscribe if you're not already, and like the video, subscribed or not. There's also a new thing you can do called Hype. If you have a question to ask or statements to make, go ahead and leave a comment. We try our best to answer all comments. If you'd like to watch a 2-hour atmospheric demonstration of a day-to-night transition in action using this system and scene, click the video in the upper right. This has been Billy Cultist. So long for now.